The Newsday continues here in One News Now. I'm Diego Castro, bringing you the biggest headlines from around the world. European leaders have agreed to open EU membership talks with Ukraine. EU Council President Charles Michel announced on X that it would open accession negotiations with Ukraine and Moldova. It also had granted candidate status to Georgia. Michel said the move was a clear signal of hope for their people and for our continent. The announcement by the European Council comes nearly 2 years after the bloc accepted Ukraine as a candidate state. The agreement also comes despite Hungary pledging to block this decision during the current two-day EU summit.
This is a historic moment, and it shows the credibility of the European Union, the strength of the European Union. It's extremely important. We want to support Ukraine. It's a very powerful political signal. It's a very powerful political decision. And today and tonight, I think to the people of Ukraine, we are on their side, and this decision made by the member states is extremely important for the credibility of the European Union.
Kyiv residents are welcoming news of the start of talks of joining the European Union. Some Ukrainians were happy to hear the news, as many think their country is at the center of Europe. Some people believe that their EU status will help finish the war and push Ukraine towards better development. The green light given to Ukraine to start talks on its EU membership is seen as a big boost for the war-ravaged country and a loud message to Russian President Vladimir Putin. But it could be years or even decades before the country actually becomes a full-fledged member of the EU.
God bless us to join this EU. Although we have been in the European Union for a long time, we are Europe. Ukraine is Europe, the center of Europe. I want us to be given the status of a proud member of Europe. Let's hope God only give us a victory.
I support the desire to join the EU and who would like it to happen in a year or two. If everything goes well, I will be happy, but we don't know what will happen next. Wonderful and excellent. It is unlikely that we will enter the EU yet, but talks are already good.
Palestine says the Biden administration must now walk the walk in pursuing a two-state solution between Israel and Palestine. The call comes as U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan met with Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant to discuss the course of the war. The U.S. shielded Israel against growing international calls for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Washington, however, publicly disagreed on a post-war scenario. The Prime Minister of Palestine says the U.S. must take specific steps towards an elusive two-state solution. That includes applying pressure and dealing more firmly with Israel.
There are quite a number of issues that the United States can do. One is to call upon Israel to stop the war. The United States has been calling upon Israel to avoid killing civilians and so on. You cannot avoid killing civilians if you continue the war. Second important issue, those who have not been killed by Israeli bombardment, they have been starving to death. There are 5 entry points to Gaza that United States can pressure Israel to allow international aid to go into Gaza from these entry points.
Israeli President Isaac Herzog, however, has spoken against a proposed two-state solution. Herzog says it's not the time to be talking about establishing an independent state, as Israel's emotional pain from the October 7 attack remains fresh.
In order to get back to the idea of dividing the land or negotiating peace or talking to the Palestinians, etc., one has to deal first and foremost with the emotional trauma that we're going through and the need and demand for full sense of security for our people.
We'll be back with more stories after the break. Keep it here on One News. You're still watching One News Now World. I'm Diego Castro. Following the UN climate talks in Dubai known as COP28, the Environment Department says the Philippines has secured a seat on the inaugural board of the Loss and Damage Fund, or LDF. The LDF is a climate fund that supports countries vulnerable to severe climate-related disasters. This fund was launched at the beginning of COP28, and by the end of it, it was able to lock in some $700 million in pledges from countries. DENR's Secretary Tony Yulo Loizaga says the Philippines will represent the Asia-Pacific Group as a full member for 2024 and 2026 and as an alternate member in 2025. Aside from that, Loizaga says we also want to become a host for the LDF, which is similar to US hosting the ADB headquarters. Loizaga says this move will allow the Philippines to influence global policies around climate change.
The Philippines' seat on the board will give us an opportunity to influence also this kind of capture, no? Sino ba ang pwedeng talagang mag-apply and how fast, no, we can access this fund. The main gain for us in terms of being the host of the board and being on the board itself is to continue to represent the vulnerable countries in the world that are developing and need to have special consideration given to these countries in order for us to, in fact, drive what should be the appropriate financing available.
Now, in the COP28 summit, almost 200 nations agreed to transition away from fossil fuels in a landmark deal. How huge is the expected impact of this move in the fight against climate change? Associated Press Climate and Environment News Director Peter Prengaman explains.
Here in Dubai at the annual UN climate talks, delegates for the first time just named the cause of climate change, and that is the burning of fossil fuels like oil, gas, and coal. The burning of all these, which we use to power our lives, send emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, up into the atmosphere, which heat the planet. And as the planet heats, we have extremes, extreme weather, extreme drought, all kinds of things that cause problems for humanity. As part of this decision, delegates also told the world they need to ramp up the use of renewable energies, solar, wind, geothermal, lots of other things that do not produce emissions or produce very few emissions. Now, scientists have known for more than 100 years that the burning of fossil fuels lets off emissions that go up into the atmosphere and heat the planet. So there's nothing new here. But what's new and significant is the way that it was called out on a world stage, which really pushes the world very much through peer pressure to make changes and makes it more difficult when countries go in an opposite direction. We have in the text now, in this document, that the world must transition away from fossil fuels. And there's really no going back on that. What we will see likely next year is more discussion of that, more kind of strengthening of that language, maybe more timetables put, and then more discussion next year about finance. The world needs trillions of dollars to really move to renewable energy. This sets the stage to have much more discussion of how that money might be generated.
Let's now take a quick look at other world stories we're watching. Guyana and Venezuela affirmed their commitment to ensuring the region remains peaceful amid a dispute over a potentially oil-rich border area. Venezuela recently revived its claim over a decades-long disagreement over the jungle region of Essequibo after major oil and gas discoveries. A New York State appeals court denied Donald Trump's bid to overturn a gag order restricting the former U.S. president from publicly talking about court staff in his New York civil fraud trial. In a 4-page ruling, the appeals court said that the legal mechanism Trump used to raise the challenge is improper, being outside the normal course of appellate review. And the cause of death of Andre Broher, who died earlier this week at the age of 61, revealed to be lung cancer. At the time of Broher's cause of death, was announced as due to a brief illness. According to his publicist, the Emmy-winning actor was only recently diagnosed with the disease. And those are the top world headlines of the hour. Join us again at 9:45 a.m. as we continue to monitor the day's biggest stories. I'm Diego Castro. We are One News. All sides, all the time.